Hey, what is going on, guys? Hope you're having a great day. It's John here. Thank you for checking the video. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, as usual, don't hesitate. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, or check out my moving company so we would hopefully be able to service you if you're in the local area, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get straight into the information I think would be beneficial for today. So yesterday we had just seen the Democratic debates between President Trump and potential President Joe Biden, right? And I think that they did an all right job in being able to represent the different political affiliations that they're currently with, right? And I took some notes, and so what I wanted to do today is basically just explain from my point of view how I saw the presidential debates and kind of give you some information on how they did, right? And the other thing I wanted to mention, just like I mentioned in the TikTok video, there was a lot of hostility that was happening between the presidential candidates, right? And I think it's primarily due to the fact that we still don't have a third party representative. So I am a strong believer in the fact that we should have a third option in being able to choose who's going to be the leader of the free world, right? If you only have a dual party system, then you can have a situation where the duopoly is essentially controlled, and you can control basically who's going to be the president, right? And I think that I explained it very well in an article that I wrote called Wizard's Choice Theory or Magician's Choice Theory. If you have the opportunity, go ahead and check that article out. So I'm going to go ahead and get straight into the notes that I took, right? So when they started off, one of the first things that I noticed is that the affordable healthcare plan that Obama had basically introduced, I think that we should have built upon that system, right? And Biden had mentioned that, Trump decided that he wanted to try to dissolve that situation and essentially go with the direction that he thought would be a better situation in being able to help with our healthcare system, right? Which I think we absolutely have to create a strong infrastructure for the healthcare system because we have people that need access to it, right? Not everybody has access to the resources that you would need to be able to have a decent healthcare system, right? And I think that that's really important, right? And then Trump basically came back with the fact that Biden had 47 years in government to be able to create change, which is valid. Like, we have to bring that to people's attention. That's not something that you should basically just let pass by. Like, if you have 47 years to be able to significantly accomplish certain things, then you have to get something done. And one of the things that people would appreciate, like the three things that I see that are going to define who the president is being able to provide things like universal basic health care, universal basic tuition, and universal basic income. And that's it's really important to make sure that you mention, right? Trump's been in presidency in government at all for 3-4 years, right? If he's been able to create a significant amount of change, even if it's not necessarily in your best interest, let's say it's against your personal agenda, right? If he was able to do that in 3 to 4 years, how come we've had this situation where 47 years went by where the things that we wanted to get done weren't necessarily accomplished, right? And so the next thing that I noticed is that there's a difference in energy, right? Like, one of the presidential candidates had a very dominant, very aggressive kind of mentality towards how he entered the situation and how he exited the situation. And then you had the other presidential candidate that obviously was, relatively more comfortable. But at the same time, you could see the difference in how the energy was being brought, right? Like, when you're in a presidential debate, right, I think presence is absolutely necessary to be able to show the viewers, show the audience, show the people that you have the potential to make sure that you're gonna, own your position. Like, if you're the president of the United States, you have a position that, like, the highest position essentially in the world, right? You don't have the opportunity to be able to, let somebody basically run over you. And I think President Trump, he might have won that situation. Now, with the next thing that they mentioned, that I saw, was that Biden was definitely for the lower classes that didn't have health care or resources. You could see that there was a situation where Biden was definitely rooting for the people that don't have those accessibilities, right? Like, if you are in a situation where you were just born to a bad situation, I think the Biden philosophy would be a good foundation to be able to view how different socioeconomic structures view the lower classes, right? Like there's a stigma that, people of the higher classes already have a certain agenda, or they already have a certain view of the lower classes, and it's never good, right? Like if you're a high class person, you look at a low class person like, hey, you know what, you should work harder, you should do better, you should put more work ethic in, right? And like that's like one of the things that's essentially destroying our country, is that we don't have people that are in the higher classes that understand what the lower classes even look like, right? So Biden definitely won the situation where he's looking out for the lower class personnel. So the next thing, they didn't answer a question that I absolutely wanted them to answer, right? It was about basically packing your courts or ending the filibuster. If you're not familiar with those two types of situations, I don't have enough time to be able to go deep into it, but do some research on the benefits of packing the courts as well as the detriments of having a filibuster. So yeah, Trump had mentioned something about the press, right? Like the people that are basically CNBC, like all these areas that are basically trying to gain your attention and point you in a certain direction in how our democracy is going, right? These news conglomerates that we have a certain agenda, and they're oftentimes leaning in one or the other direction, right? And you can see it very evident that the news crews are of a certain, they have a certain agenda. You could even relatively see it a little bit in the prompter, like the not the prompter, but the individual that was basically mediating the conversation. If you look hard enough, you can kind of see which direction that he was kind of pulling for, which is important for us to make sure that the referee is never for a certain side, right? If you're playing a basketball game, if you're playing a football game, you want to make sure that the referees are equal in being able to deliver the information, being able to bring the content that the viewers would need to be able to make a subjective opinion based on how the promoters, the people that are representing both political parties or all three political parties, and it's really important to make sure that's done correctly. So the next place is that Biden was open to other political aisles' point of views. That's something that he mentioned, and I think one of the benefits of being in this democracy, right, is having the opportunity to see other people's opinions. Like if you are of a certain party, right, like let's say you're a hardcore Republican, if you don't have the ability to be able to have conversation with somebody that's a Democrat or a Libertarian, then you are at a deficit due to the fact that you're not looking at the entire situation from every point of view. Like what makes some other countries really helpful is that they have a round table type perspective on how they view issues, right? It's not a left or right kind of thing. It's a, hey, what would be the best option to be able to help all of our people out? And that's really important. Like we haven't had many presidential candidates that were able to see, hey, you know what, if they're a Democrat, hey, that Republican view, that is a really good point of view, and that's something that we should introduce into policy and legislation. Let's go ahead and do that, or vice versa. Being able to see somebody else's opinion is important because they might know something that you don't know. And if you don't know whatever it is that they know, then you are at a disadvantage. And if we are for everybody, if we're for America, we want to make sure that we're promoting, even if it's against my political affiliation, but it's better for the people, let's do that. So that's something that is really important, right? So then Biden basically came back with the fact that Trump paid $750 for his taxes. So think about that for a second, right? You paid more for taxes. I can guarantee if you're watching this video, absolutely. I'd paid more for taxes. I can absolutely guarantee that, 100% I paid more for that than taxes, right? Which is important to make sure that we're mentioning, right? Like if we have a system that is set up that basically makes it easier for the higher levels of the social and economic strata to essentially get away with paying less in taxes, while the lower people in the social and economic strata are paying for the majority of the infrastructure and they create the majority of the revenue, then why are we allowing these tax systems to basically be in place that benefits the capitalist elitist class, while the lower ends of the economic spectrum are basically like having difficulties being understanding why they even have to pay taxes in the first place? That's why majority of people don't really want to pay taxes, which makes sense even though we have to, right? And then basically Trump came with a big win, basically telling him that Biden helped pass a legislation that helps him avoid taxes, which is important to acknowledge, right? So remember the other video that I made basically talking about how there's a situation where the elitist class are essentially choosing the representatives to represent the elitist class. Well, that was a perfect representation of what just happened. Biden said, hey, bro, why did you only pay $750 in taxes? Biden says, hey, bro, you passed legislation to let me do that. That's one of the fundamental problems that we're having, is that we have a situation where it's like a revolving type situation, a revolving circle. We're allowing these situations to go by because the people that are representing us are the people that are for the elitist class. And that's it's crucial for us to be able to acknowledge that, and then to be able to elect leaders that have been through it, that have started from the ground up, that were in bad neighborhoods and bad areas, and we're able to see from the ground like what's going on. Like a lot of the Republican or representatives that we have don't go to the hood. They don't go to the bad areas. They don't see the difficulty that people have to go through. They don't see people having to do things so that they would be able to get to the point where they're self-sufficient enough to be able to pay for housing, pay for food, pay for healthcare, there are millions of people that we have throughout the United States that live below the poverty line or at the poverty line, and we're not necessarily acknowledging them because they don't necessarily believe in the political structure that we have created, due to the fact that nobody is being able to hear them or understand them. So that's one of the other problems. Right. So then Trump basically mentioned that the Biden family, they were receiving a lot of money from overseas, which is, it's important for us to acknowledge, right? If other countries have a certain agenda, right, and it's not necessarily for the benefit of the American public, being able to buy out certain political candidates is going to happen. That's not something that we can stop, right? Unless we acknowledge it and unless we do something so that we can make sure that it doesn't happen, right? There should be some legislation that prevents those kind of situations from happening, because if there's not those situations, then we're going to have a possible situation where people from overseas, other countries, are being able to influence our political elections. And if we don't stop that, there is going to be a significant change in the structure of how we view politics, as well as the globalization effort that's happening from overseas. And then basically Trump said that he's losing money because he's in presidency. So this is one of the areas that I think it's important to make sure that we're acknowledging the fact that, reality speaking, Trump didn't have to run for president. You know what I mean? Like he could have continued in the direction that he was going, making money, doing whatever, real estate or whatever business that he was doing, and not necessarily worry about the American public. So it's important for us to keep that in mind. He could have possibly became president, and lost money, right? And if that's the situation, right, if he became president and he lost a significant amount of money, then kudos to him. Thank you for being able to represent the public and to try to help. Now, on the flip side, if the reality of the situation is that there was a power dynamic that was at play, and the long-term view of being able to create more generational wealth would be beneficial if he became president, that's more important, right? If there's a long-term view, and we saw it, and we were able to see how it would be beneficial for us to acknowledge it, then maybe we should view it from a certain point of view. All right, so education, work, and racial injustices. I think that Biden won the situation. There were a few instances where Biden had mentioned, the differences that people have in being able to reach success due to a opportunity line being different. The starting line between the opportunities and whatnot are different between different races and different socioeconomic classes. That's a fact. That's not something that you can go around. So the peaceful protests, like there was a moment, right, where I saw basically how they were talking about the protests that were going on, right? So in my opinion, people say there should never be violent protests, that we should always make sure that, the protests are peaceful and it's backed by the Constitution, and we should make sure that, that the foundation of that, our ability to be able to do that is solid, and that should never be revoked, right? And then I started thinking, are there ever situations where protests should be violent? And, currently we're in a situation, right, where it seems that the political figures, the representatives that we have, are are not for the general public, they're for the elitist class. So my question to you is, if you were put in a situation where basically you didn't have the ability to be to create any change due to the fact that the structure that we use, our democracy, to create change is being hindered basically by the representatives that are essentially crooked and don't have the best interests of the American public, should you ever violently protest? That's the question for you, right? If they're doing that, and you have the ability to either protest peacefully and nobody really listen to you, or protest violently and force them to listen to you, those are the questions. Should you do that or should you not do that? So the racial sensitivity training, basically this is what Trump said, right? And this is one of the parts where I saw and I was like, are you like, did like, he said it was a reversal. That's literally what he said. He said that there is a reversal of the situation. If you have the opportunity, go back, and when they talk about the racial sensitivity training, if he's saying that there's a reversal, there's a problem with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, if he's saying that it's like negative and they're doing all these bad stuff and they're trying to make sure that people are becoming aware of how the sensitivity training is basically affecting certain groups while it's not affecting other groups, and he calls it a reversal, that's a problem. You feel me? That's a problem. That's an issue. We have to acknowledge that. If it's a reversal, hell yeah, we should definitely reverse it to make sure that the ethnic minorities that have been experiencing difficulty in being able to get their voice out have the opportunity to be heard. All right. So so the other place is that Biden was raised in the suburbs, right? Even though it was like in the 50s, 60s, he had the opportunity to be able to see the suburbs, right? Versus Trump essentially being born to the highest level of the economic classes, right? That we have to acknowledge that. Even though there's a situation where, for the majority of the last 20 to 30 years, they've both been experiencing some of the benefits of the elitist class. Biden had mentioned billionaires made more wealth during the coronavirus and during the last 3 to 4 years than the general public, while the general public has basically remained stagnant in their ability to generate wealth. There is another part where basically Trump was bashing the Biden family, and we should acknowledge that, right? If you were in a confrontation with somebody, right, we basically say to leave family out of it, right? Like if you're having an argument, leave family out of it. If our political representatives are involving family members, we have to make sure that we acknowledge that that's not how America does it. You know what I mean? Like, if we're gonna have a confrontation, if we're gonna have an issue, it's me and you. It's not gonna be me, you, and the kids, me and you, and your family. It's just me and you. And I think our ability to be able to make sure that structure stays intact is very important. Trump was for electric vehicles. I think I appreciate that. Now, of course, there's an agenda. There's a capitalist reasoning as to why it would be beneficial for us to have electric vehicles, and for us to, like, there are certain incentives that he's placed in legislation that make it helpful for certain car companies and for certain manufacturing companies to be able to appreciate that. The other area that I think is important to mention is that we have a certain system. The way it's set up is that you can provide certain benefits if you are of the capitalist system and you focus on making sure America appreciates capitalism, right? But if we have a situation where if we were able to, for us to be able to receive the necessary social benefits, such as, like I mentioned, universal basic income, universal basic tuition, universal basic healthcare, and for us to do that, we would have to basically make sure that we tax the companies, the multi-billion-dollar companies, the multinational companies, and this idea of them moving somewhere else if we don't provide the correct, the good foundation for them to be able to use the tax system within the United States, or use the incentives that the legislation has been able to pass. If they're going overseas, we need to make sure that we pass legislation so that they don't have the opportunity to be able to do that, right? If there's a situation where we could provide it from the United States and it could be helpful for the United States, we need to pass legislation that keeps these companies, essentially forces these companies to be able to have to participate. The other area that I think is beneficial to acknowledge is that, like, I hate to say it, right, but if we look at China, right? and they're using like their system, right? They have the CCP, the Communist Party of China, right? And and they have basically, you know, risen over the last 20 years and have become a superpower again. And they have a capitalist, socio-capitalist type system, right? We need to make sure that they're not out competing us, right? We have to be competitive. We have to make sure that we're acknowledging that China views it from a different perspective. Like the way that they're saying it, they're playing the long term game, and we have to be able to think long term. And one of the deficits of the capitalist system is that it doesn't necessarily view things from a generational point of view, right? Like if China's thinking, all right, so we have these situations where, you know, this class might have to sacrifice certain things, right? And we have like the other situation where like this class might have to sacrifice this, but the class, the generation afterwards is going to be able to appreciate this and this and this, and those are basically like building blocks that are giving people the opportunity to be able to appreciate the direction that society is going. Then we need to think like that, think long term, think in a generational point of view, and that's what I see China doing in comparison to the, you know, short term view that I see within the capitalist system that we're using, even within the presidency that we're seeing right now. And then Trump said, "You make up." Trump basically said you make up a lot of shit, right? And they cut out the. I think he said that. If he didn't say that, Trump, my bad, bro. But I thought that that was so funny because you could see it sounded like he said, "Yeah, you make a lot of shit up," and then you know cut out, and then Trump looked around and he was like, which I thought was funny. So yeah, that's the video for the day. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, thank you for checking the video out. Have a great day. Don't forget, donate. View all of my content on all the social media platforms that I'm currently at. I just started uploading videos to TikTok, so check those videos out. And again, if you need moving help or if you need labor assistance, contact my company, Next Gen Moving. Thank you guys for checking the video. Have a great night or a great day.